Welcome to the new sound of online radio. Welcome to the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network. 'Cause you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven. A mix of today's hits and hard-to-find favorites, combined with the most entertaining and intriguing talk anywhere. This is your sound. This is the sound of Universal Broadcasting Network at UBNradio.com.
Hey everyone. Hey everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is Ron Frierson, Focus with Ronnie Frierson. Wow. This has been an incredible period of time that we live in. And I would love to be able to come onto the show and just talk about politics and just talk about the horse race that comes along with the election season. And it is that. It is a horse race, and some of it is entertaining. But guys, I got to tell you, we have a lot to discuss. There's a lot going on. We have the stuff that's most important to us in the short term, meaning our kitchen table issues. And we also have the things that are going on in the world around us that will affect us. And also it'll affect our kitchen table issues at the end of the day. I would be remiss not to bring up the situation that's happened in Paris, because this is their 9/11. But we also have to take into account ancient cultures, older cultures, and we'll delve into that a little bit during the show as well, because I believe a lot of the things that we're dealing with in regards to the Middle East is a fundamental misunderstanding of the cultures that we're dealing with. I think we need to sit back and understand the history of that area, the oppression, the struggle, the war, the deeply entrenched religious values, and also understand that the people that perpetrate these evil acts are very much so a fringe element. They do not represent Islam. They do not, once again, and I am very much so Christian. I'm a preacher's son, but I also am a citizen of the world, and I have friends of all different stripes, all different faiths, and they do not represent Islam at all. So that needs to be said. And it's a civil war going on within that particular religion, and on one side you have the people that are just like us, but then you have that vocal minority. It's the same with any group. It's usually the loudest ones that get the attention. And obviously the loudest ones right now are these evil ones, and they have to find a way. We have to find a way as a collective segment that truly represents humanity. We have to find a way to silence those that have no other aim but to kill and destroy civilization. I'm going to talk about a few things to start off with. Number one, Mali. Today in the African country of Mali, which is neighboring Nigeria, 21 people were killed in Mali in a hotel that was taken under siege by Islamist militants. And this Islamist group was tied to Al-Qaeda. Yes, Al-Qaeda is still around as well. And we still have Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Right now, the terrorists du jour, the terrorists that get the most fame, are ISIS, but there are blocks of fundamentalists on just about every corner of this globe, all seeking to wreak havoc on the system in whatever way they can, and all of them searching for the spotlight. So 21 people were killed in Mali at a hotel. I believe it was Radisson, and this was in the capital city of Mali. Of course, in Paris last week, 129 people were killed, and this was ISIS related. The French have really buckled down and have made a concerted effort to go after the terrorists, but it's like playing whack-a-mole. You can get those guys, those particular people that did this, but it's an ideology that needs to be dealt with. And we'll go back on that as well in regards to the ideology that will make someone feel as if this is an option for them to seek justice in their perverted sense of the word. And it's truly a perverted sense of the word to think that justice comes along with you strapping a suicide vest on, or justice comes with you mowing down innocent civilians. That's an entirely different issue, but we'll get to that as well. 43 people were killed not too long ago in Beirut, Lebanon. Okay. 224 people were killed in a Metrojet crash in Egypt. And that was a Russian airliner, and which obviously brings the Russians more directly into this conflict. Not that they weren't already involved because of their decisions to back the Assad regime in Syria and become a major player in regards to keeping that regime in power, which puts them on the other side of the battle line, so to speak, against these Islamist terrorists. But all that being said, with these numbers that add up, Boko Haram, which is an Islamist group out of Africa, the Nigeria area, last year alone, they've killed 6,664 people. Last year alone, 6,664 deaths last year alone is attributable to this African terrorist group called Boko Haram. Now, ISIS is not far behind from last year. According to the New York Times, ISIS last year killed 6,073 people, not too far behind. So you have these two Islamist groups that are responsible for the bulk of the terrorist deaths last year. Now, what really concerns me in this regards is that they can use the most primitive means, a crude bomb, and inflict such maximum damage in comparison or commensurate to the type of technical skill necessary to create their weapons of destruction. And they do it with impunity. They don't care who their targets are. And what's super troubling to me is the fact that now the trend is to have women involved. And when you get to the point where your women, who are, in my opinion, the cradle of civilized people, you can tell a lot about a group of people by the way they treat their women. Women are the only creatures on this planet that can bear children. Women are our first teachers. They are what equalize. They are who equalizes us men. They keep our aggression tamed, so to speak. They're important. They're important to the species. Very important to the species. And if you get to a point where your women are willing to kill themselves as opposed to being protected, then it says a lot. How do we get to that point? How did we get to this point? It's something that baffles me. If anyone wants to give me a call and ask me a specific question, you can reach me at area code 323-843-2826. Again, 323-843-2826. Or you can email me at ronnie.frierson@gmail.com, and be sure to put in the subject line, focus, so I will know exactly what you're emailing me about. Speaking of that, I have an email that came through from Beth. Her question is such: I have seen a lot of people / policies expressing anger and hate regarding letting Syrian refugees in America and towards Muslims. Do you feel that Muslims have it worse now than after 9/11 in regards to how to treat members of their community? What do you think people can do to help change people's hatred for non-extremist Muslims in America? That's a good question, and I'm not even sure if I'm qualified to answer that outright. But what I can tell you is this, is that fear brings out the worst in people, and fear is strong. And the fear that is being perpetrated within a certain segment of our society is only being stoked by the fact that this is a presidential cycle, and some of the candidates don't have the class, for the lack of a better word, to understand that this is a fearful time, and some of the worst things that happen during these fearful times. I heard something today that was disgusting that came out of Donald Trump's mouth. He said something to the effect of there should be a database on the Muslims in the United States of America. After reading up on that, I found out that basically a reporter framed a question in a certain way to make Donald Trump disavow that idea, and he didn't disavow it. So to give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe Trump just didn't agree with it, but just didn't disavow it. So let's just say he didn't agree with it, then he should have said so. But by not disavowing it, especially in the type of media frenzy that we live in today, then it's essentially tantamount to him agreeing with it. And that's disgusting. We've noticed times in history where this type of things, if you think about the Japanese internment camps in World War II, if you think about what happened during World War II over in Europe, to go down that road, it's not only dangerous, but it feeds into the paranoia that feeds groups like ISIS and these other Islamist groups across the country or around the world. They want it to be us versus them. And every time, this is not a zero-sum game wherein we take a couple steps to the left and there's a vacuum there. They will fill the vacuum with their hate, their rhetoric, and they are pretty good at propaganda because they're steadily getting new recruits to come in. I understand that one of the terrorists killed in France in response to the attacks was actually an American. So we have Americans going there, which doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all, because this is an ideology, and anyone that adopts this ideology will obviously be subject to the possibility of going off the edge, and that's just what it is. The France has, and I spent a lot of time in France, in Tours, France, which is near Orléans. And by the way, to all my people in French, in France, nous sommes avec toi, which means that we are with you. Je suis avec toi. I'm with you as well. France has the highest population in Europe of people of the Muslim faith. France also has the highest population in Europe of Jewish residents. But in France as well, there's, like most older European countries, I said this a little bit last week, it's like, I guess the best way to put it is old money. And if your, for lack of a better word, caste system is set, it's hard to break into that system. We don't understand how blessed we are to live in the United States, wherein we're such a young country. No, we are not perfect. And we started off with our huge mistake that we're still paying for in regards to slavery. But just think about the older cultures that have been here for thousands of years. just think of how deep and entrenched some of those mistakes that they've had throughout their histories have led them to where they are now. And I mean, you can take that and extrapolate that into some of the other ancient cultures that we're dealing with that we sometimes consider adversaries. When you're dealing with China, when you're dealing with Iran, these are ancient cultures. Think about it. Just let's take ourselves out of our patriotic stance and really think about when you're dealing with ancient cultures, their view on history is different than ours. We think about George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Ben Franklin, those guys. That's about 300 years ago. Think back to Darius the Great in Iran. These are thousands of years ago. Think about to some of the empires in China when they dominated most of Asia. These are thousands. So just think if they had to, in school, they study the history, how much deeper and richer their history is than ours. There's something to that. So when you're dealing with people with that type of history, there's a pride that comes with that. And then now you have a new country, which is ours, which is the greatest country on earth, in my opinion, but I'm also American. You have to understand that each of these countries and the people in those countries feel the same way about their country. If you came up in a country or you were instrumental of bringing math and algebra to civilization, the birthplace of civilization, then you're going to have pride in that. And so now you have this newer country, United States, that's obviously a power and needed in the world, but now they're pushing you around. You wouldn't like it. I think we have a call coming through. Caller, man, have your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, this is Woody Wilson. How are you, Ron?
Woody, thanks for calling in. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well today, man. I was just listening to some of your commentary, and I'm saddened by all this violence that's going on around the world. That you just really can't put your finger on it in terms of how to fix it, what the solution is. And I can only go back to, because I look at some of the people that are influenced, and I look at their background, and they seem to be troubled, the majority of them, the ones that they're recruiting. And then I always fall back on the educational point in terms of the lack of education, in terms of, religion is about love. It's about peace. It's about hope. And they fall victim to these masterminds of manipulation that get in their heads and somehow convert them to this radical state of mind. It's just baffling to me.
Yeah, and Woody, this is not something that happens overnight. Most of these perpetrators, for the most part, are very young. They don't understand the history involved. So this had to be something wherein this is a boiling point, and these youngsters have to have grown up within a context where this seems reasonable to them, and it has to be based on a system and something that they've learned over the course of time from generations. You just don't wake up and decide that there's no reason to live, and now you're going to go and get 72 virgins if you're going to kill yourself. It has to be deep. It just makes no sense. And I do believe that, and the killing makes no sense. But
you know what I'd like to see, Ron, is the Muslims are not standing up loud enough across the world and saying and denouncing this as Islam. This radical activity. I mean, that's not Islam. That's not representative of Islam.
No, it's not. But also think about this, and that's a good point to a certain extent. But it could be a situation where we're just not hearing what they have to say.
Hearing it. Yeah, maybe
so
the media is not broadcasting.
Exactly. Now, and that's an important point. Of all the people, I listed early in the show the people that were killed recently, in Mali and Paris and Beirut and the plane crash that went down in Egypt. But yet last year, again, over 6,000 people were killed by these groups.
Right.
The vast majority of the people that are killed by these groups are of that same faith. The vast majority of them are. Now, there are also situations wherein we have to understand that there's a narrative that's put forth, and we're always talking about the fact that the moderate Muslims aren't loud enough. They're not saying it, but I have friends like Reza Aslan who has spoken on this continuously, but he's pushed to the fringe. And then I think that what exacerbates
mainstream media needs to definitely put these folks on.
They need to put them on.
Make it loud and clear so that the ones that are influenced or starting to be influenced by these radicals will understand that, no, that is not correct.
Exactly.
You know, what you're teaching me is not the way to go.
Exactly.
And that should be broadcasted. I mean, CNN needs to have a Muslim commentator.
I completely agree. There should be this.
Every station, every news station across America should have a Muslim representative.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
they should be making it clear that this is not Islam.
Yes.
And so that the rest of the world, people like those who bomb mosque because they're just associating all Muslims with this radical behavior, which is wrong, but at least they would have some form of education in terms of what it's all about.
That's a great point, and thank you very much, Woody. You know, I always appreciate you calling in. You make great points as always.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Now, what Woody said is so true, but then what does that mean? That means that we have to depend on responsible journalism. Responsible journalism would dictate that of a religion that has more than 1.6 billion followers, that you ought to have someone on your staff or someone that can speak for the mainstream of that faith that can let everyone else know without being shouted down by the Sean Hannitys of the world or those types of people who want to keep the fear flowing. Because the only way to get around this, there is no way to get around it. We have to live together. We have to. There's really no alternative. You cannot, nor should it enter your mind like it did Mr. Trump's, or maybe, like I said, it's something that he just didn't disavow, to separate an entire group of humans based on their faith and think that all of them fall for this nonsense that we've been dealing with for the last few years. And then we have to backtrack again. I said something earlier when Woody was on the line about what causes this. And I've had conversations with my friends of all different faiths again. And everyone has their preferences, so to speak. I mean, I have people that are family to me. You know, they can come over without calling, that are of the Jewish faith, Israeli. I mean, people that are family to me. I have very, very close friends that are like family to me that are of the Islamic faith. And I know for a fact that this is not what it's all about. It comes down to the individual person. So if these young people feel it necessary for them to go about and do such evil and heinous acts, where is that coming from? What is it where this mass psychosis, this mass pathology, this murderous instinct is somehow meant to be glamorous, or they feel like they're doing God's work? Where is that coming from? Until we figure that out, we're going to always have to deal with this. Until we figure out the root cause of all of this, you can kill as many as you can, but it'll be like playing whack-a-mole, wherein you hit one and another one will pop up somewhere. We have to root out what it is that's making this possible. What's radicalizing these people, what's making it possible. And then let's just say that it's, for whatever reason, it's a certain mindset. It seems like we have another call coming in. Let me take that call. Caller. Thank you for calling in. Can I have your name and the city you're calling in from?
My name is Oliver Jeezy. I'm calling from Los Angeles, California.
Oliver, thank you for calling. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Tell me what you got to say to me, man.
Well, first and foremost, I wanted to congratulate you on your show. I think you're doing a great job bringing some social issues to light for everyone to kind of get a better understanding in terms of what's going on. And I wanted to discuss with you something that your previous caller, Woody, had discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in regards to education being a factor to help some of these disgruntled youths that are trying to go overseas and fight on behalf of a religion that they don't really understand. And it seems to me that, this is kind of missing the point, because if you really look at the individuals that are running these operations, these guys are engineers. They have degrees in medicine and science. So there's something else going on. And we don't take the time out to really understand who our enemies are. You discussed, for example, at some point, how these individuals are brought to light, right? What makes them want to go and fight on behalf of Islam? Well, there's a large number of individuals that are non-Islamic that are becoming brainwashed in Europe to go to Syria and fight on behalf and, denounce their current religion and go fight for Islam. So there's a lot of dimensions at play here. And to kind of approach it with a singular objective, I think is kind of what boxes us in, such as like the current leadership conducting these just massive aerial bombing campaigns overseas. And you really want to look at how many orphans are made by collateral damage.
Wow.
How many brothers and sisters are lost, and how susceptible these individuals will become to listening to some caliphate come in and potentially brainwash them and say, well, now you have to go and seek revenge.
That's a great point.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm sorry. That's just a great point. That's something we don't really think about. From one of the key things that's necessary for many free-thinking people is to put yourself in another person's shoes. And maybe that's one of the things, like I was saying, what causes this type of behavior. And maybe this could be some of the collateral effect of what's been going on for years in regards to these bombings and creating orphans, and the people that are there taking care of you after everyone else has left out may be people that are associated with this radical form of this faith, and then they just take it to another level.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And, you have, I listen to, individuals from the Pentagon giving press briefs as to what they're trying to do. And it doesn't even seem to me that the West really understands who they're dealing with. Now, a lot of strategy is developed not on the battlefield, right? So it's not about bringing your troops in from the left or the right, but it's knowing thy enemy.
Yeah.
That seems like rule number one from Sun Tzu to any of the other great warriors.
Exactly.
And it just seems that we have three types of solutions, and we apply those solutions to every type of dynamic situation. For example, you've got President Obama, who I feel fairly highly of in terms of our current president of the United States. But he makes a political statement about removing Assad. Now, because it was a political statement, he's trying to save face. But you can understand that if Assad was to go right now from Syria, the entire situation would implode. ISIS would be able to take on more territory, like what happened with Saddam Hussein. I mean, you look at Saddam, right? No one's saying he's a great guy.
Exactly.
But how many more people are dying now? How many more human rights violations are occurring now than under his regime? So by defeating an evil, we create a greater evil, because our approach is simplistic and to some degree juvenile.
Oliver, thank you so much for calling in. This has been one of the most enlightening conversations that we had on the phone on this show. And do listen and do call in often. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate your time, too. Keep doing what you're doing, brother.
Will do. Thank you, bro.
Take care.
Oliver said some great things, and I think I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago in regards to what's going on in Syria and how this is not a situation where we choose between paradise or hell. This is the degree of hell we have to deal with, meaning this. If we should have learned the lessons from Saddam Hussein. If we pull Assad out, especially if we have something to do with it. If we pull Assad out, who's going to govern Syria? Okay? If we put him like, if we do him like we did Saddam Hussein, if we get rid of him in whatever form that takes, who's going to rule this area? And this goes all the way back to what was drawn in, I think, after World War II with the British and the French primarily, taking these areas that were primarily tribal, the Kurds, the Alawites, the Sunni, the Shia, and these were mostly tribal lands, and people identify with their faith and with their intra-culture, so to speak, more so than they do a specific nationality for the most part. I mean, it's just the way it is in certain parts of the world. And I'm going to go off on a limb here and try to see if I can delve a little deeper. The British Empire, the UK, it's a series of islands. When you live in an island, real estate is very, very important. As a matter of fact, our current real estate system is built in many respects off the British real estate model in regards to territory, meeds and bounds, strict boundaries and borders and things of that sort. And that's important, especially when you live on a landlocked island. It's a large population, but that mentality has spread everywhere the British Empire wanted to go. Every place that they've quote unquote conquered or had their influence on, they've tried to draw those same lines. So when Winston Churchill and I think it was de Gaulle in France and some of these others, they started drawing lines in the Middle East to split up certain territories, they did the exact same thing. Iraq is a product of the British. I believe Syria is a product of the French. These were all countries with man-made borders based on this European model of what this country should look like. And so there we are. And from their inception, with these sort of man-made borders, there's been tensions within. There's been countries within countries within countries. They had the Kurds in the north, which were part of Iraq. You had, I believe, the Shia in Iraq, who were primarily in the eastern part of the country, and then you had the Sunni population primarily in the west. And you have all the other different factions of faiths and villages, including the Christian areas. And it's a different place. This is a different part of the world that we've tried in our way to make it look like something that's familiar to us. And to the victors go the spoils, so to speak. But at the same time, you get what you break and you get what you pay for. So bring that little bit of history into the equation. We see what's happened in Iraq with the strong man, which was Saddam Hussein, once he was deposed, and how the country went into chaos because there's a power vacuum. Every little sect of that civilization, of that quote-unquote country, that feels as if this is their opportunity to reclaim their lands or their independence. And so now you have all of this stuff going on there. Put that same situation in Syria. This is why I said a few weeks ago that maybe the president should just let Russia have it. Obviously, Vladimir Putin he's forgotten the lessons that he should have learned from their occupation of Afghanistan. To go back to another history lesson, remember the Russians at first invaded Afghanistan, and this birthed Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan, and the Mujahideen who fought against the Russians and drove the Russians out because it's such a difficult terrain for one, and because of that and their tribal nature and their ability to blend within the population as well as be a fighting force, it's very difficult for a civilized army to go in and conquer them because it's a different means of warfare. If you had the type of army that didn't care, if you had the Alexander the Greats that just went in and said, we're going to wipe out everybody, and then we're going to have all of the, the women of this country give offspring to our children and start a whole new bloodline. We don't do that anymore in modern warfare, and thank God we don't. But they drove out the Russians, and then we helped the bin Ladens of the world and the Mujahideen drive out the Russians, and that came back on us once we went in after the Taliban and Al Qaeda and all that stuff. We already know that. But the Russians know that. They saw what we went through in Afghanistan, and now they're doing the same thing in Syria for the most part. And they saw what we went through in Iraq as well, and I guess that's a more adequate example. So if Bashir Assad is taken out of Syria and that vacuum is there, who's going to govern? Or if Assad is still in power and the Russians help him and we stay out of it and the Russians help him, they defeat ISIS and all of the Assad deposers there, that's a civil war in that country. That's going to go on for years. Russia's going to have to put their resources into that conflict. And remember, a lot of the Russian resources are built upon their current military, meaning that their current ability to sell military equipment and weapons to a buyer, and oil. Oil prices are historically low. They have a huge country. I think most of us don't understand how huge Russia is. There's a part of Russia that looks like Europe, and if you look at them, they're European, and you can go all the way to the east, and there's a part of Russia that's just about in Japan. It's a huge country, and you have to govern all of that country. There's a lot of resources that go into that. And if oil is one of your primary sources of revenue, and you don't have that much of a strong middle class, and there's a lot of corruption there because it was a free-for-all after the fall of communism, it's hard to maintain all of that. And now you're dealing with all of that, and you're dealing with the stuff going on in Ukraine and your other former Soviet satellite countries, and you're trying to prop up Assad. That's a lot. Why would we want to become involved with that? It's beyond me. But to bring that back to our side of the equation, we are in campaign season. And when you're in campaign season and you are a candidate, especially a Republican candidate, you have to be strong. You have to act as if you're strong, which is so silly. You ought to act as what you would do if you were president. Some of the things these guys say will have us in World War III so fast. Be careful who you vote for. Be careful that you don't back someone just because they're talking tough, because none of them are going to go into a fist fight. They're going to use us. They're going to use our sons and daughters and send them to war. They're not going themselves. If it was a situation where you can send your leader in to box the other country's leader and let them fight, then tough talk works. But when your tough talk is only manifested by your ability to send someone else's kids into a war, then be careful. Wars are sometimes necessary. There is a such thing as a righteous war. But if you got someone that talks a lot, and what presidents say tend to become policy. So if you have someone who's loose at the lips and they say just about anything just to get people riled up, and other countries, other governments, other leaders are listening, somebody may call your bluff. They may. And whether or not you agree with his policies, and I don't agree with everything President Obama does, but I do agree with him, for the most part. One thing I like about him is that he's logical. He thinks. He's even keel. He would have never said something like Trump said about gathering up all the Muslims in America and putting them in a database. He would never do that. You know why? He's a thinking man. So if you have someone like Trump, after this mishap, let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say it was just a mishap. If you have someone like him speaking like that, just think about if he became president, how this would come back, how that would embolden those people that are on the edge of becoming radicalized, or how we would become more of a target. Now, the Syrian refugees, I think there's actually good points on both sides in regards to that. But I think also that we look at things a little bit differently. We see what we see based on what we have access to, which is what the president tells us or what the media shows us. Most of the Syrian refugees are going to Germany. Not here, but to Germany. Do you think for a minute that the Germans aren't worried about what types of refugees are coming into their country? Many of them are going to France. Some of them are going to the UK. All of these countries have committed to having a certain number of refugees come into their country. Do you think for a second any of these countries just said, yeah, we'll just take anybody? Or did you think they had their same internal questions as we have here? America's not the only place that's subject to a terrorist attack. We see that by what's happening in Beirut, what's happening in Paris and France, what's happening in Mali, what's happening in Egypt, how it's affect the Russians. We're not the only target on the block. So that means that each of these countries have assumed this same risk, and each of these countries have obviously put forth mechanisms to secure their borders or to vet these refugees. So this is thinking now. This is not going by what you see on TV or what the Republicans say or what the Democrats say. I can almost guarantee you, because countries talk, leaders talk, I can almost guarantee you that there was a meeting that we don't know about. There's a number that each of these countries within these developed countries that was going to receive these refugees, whether it's Angela Merkel, whether it's President Hollande in France. Angela Merkel is in Germany, President Hollande in France, whether it's the British Prime Minister, whether it's the Canadian Prime Minister, whether it's President Obama, that they all said, okay, this is how many we're going to take in. You hold up your side of the bargain, we'll hold up this side of the bargain. You never know if it's a lot of money that goes into the United States that goes to other places that we don't know. Maybe we are subsidized in another country to absorb some of these refugees so that we won't have to take them over here. There's stuff in place that we don't know about. We have to face that. There's things that you don't think that they arbitrarily pulled out the 10,000 refugee number just because he just drew a number in the hat. Everything we do is calculated. There's a reason behind everything. So that means that there was conversations that we may or may not know of at a higher level than any of us have access to that said, okay, this number is going to go here, this number is going to go there. They're going through Greece, okay? Is Greece trying to close their borders to keep them from going through Greece? And Greece is in major economic troubles. Everyone knows that. They're just about out of the EU because of their financial woes. So, and they're going through Greece, and Greece isn't trying to close their borders or worried about the pressures putting on them. So that means that maybe Greece is allowing them to go through there because Greece may be subsidized by some of these other developed countries, whether it's the United States or Germany or whoever, saying, okay, let them keep coming through there. We'll use you as a starting point for vetting these people. And you never know. And they may be paying Greece to let them continue to go through there. There's things that are going on, people, and we think too simplistically about certain things. And the world doesn't work simple. Like Oliver just said on our most recent caller, there's levels to this stuff. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm just pragmatic. I'm a thinker. And as a pragmatic thinker, do you think for a second we are the only country that's worried about whether or not the Syrian refugees are legitimate refugees or if there could be a terrorist infiltrator that's trying to get in the country? Of course, everybody thinks that. Of course, especially after what happened in Paris. So I almost guarantee you that each of these countries, whether it's Germany, the United States, Canada, UK, that are taking refugees, they also have some uniform measures in place to vet these refugees to be sure that they are true refugees. But in our country, we have to do this during a political campaign. So now you're going to have grandstanding. You're going to have people that say falsehoods. We're going to have some senators and representatives that know better, but they know that the people don't know better, so they're going to go out and say things that they know aren't true just because it's good politics during election season. Good politics doesn't always mean good policy. So we're going to take a break really quick, and we're going to come back and close this stuff up. But during our break, I want to play a song, one of my favorite songs that I think is very, very, it's apropos. It's a good thing for this. It was written by Marvin Gaye. What's Going On? It's a great song, but it's just fitting. It's fitting for the mood that the country and that the world is in. And I want to play this for you guys, and then I'll come back with some closing remarks. This is Focus with Ron Frierson, brought to you by Javago Watches. And I don't know whether or not you've seen it. I have this Javago Gliss on right now. Genuine black leather band. Don't pay attention to my big hand. A gold crown on it, rose gold crown. You can get these at JavagoWatches.com, or you can even order them on Amazon.com or things. They have a great assortment of watches, all high quality, great luxurious jewelry, and they have them for men and women. This is just my favorite of the moment, so you're going to see this on me just about every show until they give me another one, which I'm probably going to go in and get, because I've been getting a lot of inquiries about these watches and good stuff. And I believe that the website is on my screen, JavagoWatches.com, or you can go to Amazon.com and enter in Javago and look at their selection of watches. Okay, so we're going to listen to Marvin Gaye, and then we'll come back with some final thoughts. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye. Woo! That's real music right there. And you know you made real music when it's still relevant in this day and age, all these years later. So as I close out, I want to close out with some comments, and this entire program has basically been my comments, which is the way I like it, because anyway, I just do. Fear is strong. Fear is a strong emotion, and it can cause us to react in many ways. But in the course of fear, we have to, what makes us human and what makes us civilized human beings is our ability to look beyond our fear, or to recognize it for what it is and keep it in check, and not to let it paralyze us. And we all have different things we have to deal with in time, in our lives, in our own lives. And remember, fear drives elections sometimes, but fear eventually goes away unless we allow others to keep the fear within us by perpetrating it. And all we see every day is on the TV about someone's bombed here, someone's bombed there. And you start to look outside your window, and everyone that doesn't look like you becomes the suspect or enemy. Be vigilant. Understand stuff and look around to see if anything's out of the ordinary, but do not live in fear. Don't live in fear. Life is a precious thing. Life is a wonderful thing. And it's almost to a point that you have to, if you live in fear, you're looking for something good as opposed to looking for something bad. Look for something bad if something is out of normal. But don't give up on humanity. Don't allow that to happen. What we're going to talk about, I'm going to take next week off because it's a holiday. But what we're going to talk about eventually, we're going to talk about our economy. We're going to talk about economic development, which is something that's near and dear to my heart because of my actual profession where I make my money. And economic development and what drives, companies and their decisions. And we live in a global economy, and how that does affect us, how this stuff that we're dealing with now is going to affect us. I really appreciate you spending your Friday with me. You can go out and start partying now, and that's what I'm going to do. So thank you for joining me. Focus with Ronnie Frierson. Have a great weekend, and I will talk to you when I come back, which will be 2 weeks from now. But we're probably going to replay one of our most popular shows next week. And maybe if you email me at ronnie.frierson@gmail.com, you can suggest to me which of the past shows I should air next week, since I won't be on air. Okay? Thank you very much. Ronnie, Focus with Ronnie Frierson. Good night.